Welcome back. Today, we have an extra special treat for you. My guest today has multiple degrees spanning neuroscience, nutrition, and public health and policy. She is currently the Director of Operations at the Postpartum Project, a nonprofit that aims to deliver compassionate care to moms in rural Maine. She is also a farmer and lives with her fiance and young toddler. She is a creative cook, and she never runs from an intriguing societal discussion. She is a fierce mama. My guest today, Dessiree Berry.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming down from rural Maine.
Oh yeah, it was a haul.
A little giddy up. Desiree, it's an honor to have you on the show today. We've connected now for some time, and there's certain people that I end up meeting, online or in person, and then we go back and forth and with discourse, and I've really enjoyed that with you and learning with you and kind of just helping to round out my perspective. I think that we agree on a ton. I think that we disagree on some things, which I think is beautiful, and that's how discourse should be. I want to start the show today, just asking you what inspired you. First, actually, let me ask you, before the Postpartum Project, what inspired you to seek out nutrition, nutrition and public health. Neuroscience was first, excuse me.
Yeah.
So, what brought you to seek out neuroscience and then public health and then now nutrition?
Yeah, absolutely. So, ever since I was like a little kid, I was like, I'm gonna be a doctor, and that was like my end goal. I wanted when I started looking into college. I graduated high school at 17 with a CNA license. And I was like, I want something that's really diverse, that can take me in so many different directions. If being a doctor isn't really what I want to do, maybe I can be a therapist or I can be a researcher. And I landed on neuroscience. I went to St. Michael's College to get my undergraduate degree. And
Are you from Vermont?
no, I'm from New Hampshire originally, and I've lived in Maine since I was about 4.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
yeah,
Yep.
St. Mike's was like my #1 school. I loved the small community vibe. It's a beautiful campus. I love Burlington. I love Fish is like one of my favorite bands. So I was just like, I love this underground music scene here. I love the college town vibe. The people were great. As soon as I stepped onto campus, I felt at home. And I know it's so corny to say, but it was just like, this is the place.
Is it right in Burlington, St. Mike's?
Yeah, it's right outside in Colchester, but it's like a 4-minute drive into Burlington.
Yeah, I know Colchester.
Yeah.
My wife is from St. Albans.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So we know Burlington. We know Northwest Vermont.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's so wonderful there. The people are great. It's changed a lot over time, but it's still like, it was the first place I'd been where like I could ask a random person on the street, like, hey, how do I get to this store? And they would just tell me, or they'd walk me there. And I was like, these people are so friendly. Like, this is what I need in my life.
You should have grown up in Massachusetts. You would have not done too well. Nobody wants to help you. It's like, oh, I don't have time for that. Get out of here. When I came up to New Hampshire, I was at the seacoast. I was like, whoa, these are like the nicest people I've ever met. Like they want to have a couple of sentences shared back and forth. Okay, giddy up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how it is in Portland. People just have their head down and they're just going. And obviously Portland's grown a lot since I was younger too, but just in Burlington is a completely different vibe. Like everyone was just so friendly. They were kind. They were accepting and welcoming, and they were willing to help you. I was like, this is where I need to be. This is what I want to do. So yeah, I got my bachelor's in neuroscience. I did some research while I was there. I just really loved everything about the brain and the nervous system in all aspects. Like you're learning philosophy, you're learning sociology, psychology, the biochem, just every aspect of what makes up humanity. And it was such a wonderful experience. I had an amazing education. I met so many people. Towards the end of my career and like time there, I just kind of started to lose a lot of faith in the medical system and just all of the things, the hoops you have to jump through. I started to like question a lot of things. I started to question the pharmaceutical companies and the money that they were making. And I just wasn't sure if my goal of helping as many people as possible was possible as a doctor. They are amazing. They sacrifice so much. And I hear time and time again when I'm talking to them that they don't have the freedom to help people that they used to, that they have quotas to meet, that they year after year, like physical times are getting down. You can only see patients for an X amount of minutes. And if you start to go over that, they start to push you out of the practice. So I just felt like it was no longer a path for me. I was struggling with some of my own health issues. And I've been sober since I was 20.
Good on you. Wellness,
Thank you.
Wellness renegade. The
Yes.
sober thing, giddy up. Love that.
Absolutely.
And what an early time to make that decision.
Oh yeah, like I struggled a lot when I was in college, and you know, it was my 20th birthday. I woke up and I was like, this is not how I want to live my life anymore. I want a life that is joyous, wonderful, and free. And I hopped onto a Zoom AA meeting because it was in the middle of the pandemic, and I never looked back. So I'm really thankful that I found that. And I started to see a naturopathic doctor, and I was like, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to help people. This is going to be amazing. I found a great school out in Arizona, and I got into it. I was gearing up, ready to go. And then my dad got sick with multiple sclerosis. Yeah. So it was just a really big transition for my family. I didn't feel like I was ready to leave them in such like a vulnerable state. My dad was the breadwinner, and he could not do his job anymore. He was diagnosed 6 years after they think of his onset. So it was pretty progressed. And yeah, so I was in Maine.
How's he doing now?
He's doing pretty good. He's been on a really great treatment. He gets IV infusions every 28 days. It's pretty manageable, but you know, there's a lot of
What's he doing for IV infusion?
I'm not 100% sure
it's okay.
what it's called.
I can ask you later, and you can have a good share. Cool.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what it's called, but it's been really amazing for him. He hasn't had any flare-ups since he was diagnosed. Yeah, so that's been really great.
Good,
but
decent balance, can move around.
yeah, his balance is okay. It gets worse towards like the end of the month when he's due for another treatment. Yep. His memory is really bad. It's really bad. You have to tell him things like so many times, but it's just that short-term memory. His long-term memory is still there, which is really great. But MS is quite a disease, and it's definitely, it's hard to watch someone you love struggle so much.
A couple of good friends who are going through it now, and it's just like, it's, you know, a mom of 3 kids who has, you know, beautiful mom of 3 kids, who kids are like, you know, 12, 10, and 5 or 7, you know, and just to, you know, physical therapist, you know, so knew how to move her body, was understanding of how to move her body, and to see that stuff taken away, it's like, I wouldn't wish it on anyone.
No, me either. It's really hard, and it's another one of those things where they don't really know why. And like aside from it, there's a lot of people in my hometown where I grew up with who are around my dad's age. The majority of them are women. MS is primarily diagnosed in women, but a lot of people in my hometown have MS. And so it's one of those things where I've been really interested in, maybe there's an environmental exposure that's increasing the incidence rates in my hometown, but that would be something I'd have to seek out some funding for, get some better researchers who know more about it than I do and dive into, because there's got to be something there. Like,
we should be doing that type of research.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what we should be figuring out is, you know, we see something, let's figure out if it's causal. You know,
Absolutely.
Is this actually happening? Is there some type of relationship between this? We rarely do that.
No, absolutely. We rarely see that happening. And I'm just a girly who doesn't believe in coincidences. So I don't think that something like that is a coincidence, and it's something that we need to see what the environmental exposures are really causing.
Yes.
Which kind of led me into like public health.
So you didn't go to Arizona?
I didn't go to Arizona. I moved in with my fiance originally. Like, we were just roommates, and you know, as those things go. And yeah, so he was the first person who really looked at me and was like, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, I don't even know what kind of question that is. Nobody's ever asked me what I want to do. It's always just been like my family telling me I'm going to be a doctor, and me being like, yeah, I'm going to be a doctor. Like, I'm shooting for the stars. Like, so I looked into a couple.
This homie's the youngest caregiver. Was the youngest caregiver in Maine.
Yeah,
from my understanding.
Yep. He's been a caregiver since he was 18, and he's 33 now. Yeah, 33 now.
Still crushing it.
Yeah,
still doing the good work.
Absolutely.
You know, giddy up. So that's amazing that you felt, you know, you have found somebody to, you know, to see, you know, to help you to progress. You know, my wife's the same way. You know, helps me be who I am, and I think relationships like that are so important.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's such a supportive relationship, and to really have someone who just like pushes you every single day to be the best version of yourself and is also there to like pick you up when you fall down and to like just tell you it's okay. Like that's just it's such a beautiful thing, and he's an amazing father to our daughter. That has been like such a healing experience. I wish that more people like had the experience to have someone take a whole year off to just like spend time with you and to help you through the postpartum project period, the postpartum period, and to help you just like learn how to be parents and set that foundation for your child. It's amazing. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and like maybe not even maybe like a year is amazing, you
Yeah.
know, if you could do that. Like, but maybe even like just a couple of months would be really great. You
Absolutely.
know,
Most
and
people don't even get that. It's like if you have a kid on Sunday, a lot of fathers have to go right back to work on Monday. They
yeah,
don't get any period of time to help with the transition or to transition themselves. Like that's such a not only like are you watching the person that you care about become a mother and bring life into this world, like you're also becoming a father. Like you as a father is being born. And no matter if it's your first child or your eighth child, there's always a new version of that father that's being born. So I think that that needs to be met with grace and understanding and time to like accept and transition into that.
yeah, it's a wonderful, wild, uh, you know, transformational.
Hmm.
You know, going into that, you know, you do become. And everyone would always say that, like, oh, wait till you have kids, your life will change, and you know, you this, and it's like, yo, I'm the most empathetic person in the world. Like, I know that my life is going to change when I have another baby. Like,
Hmm.
obviously, I had no clue.
Yeah.
I literally thought that I was going to be like the person who was exempt from it because I knew I was going to like love this child and that it was going to change my life. And but I had no clue of how my priorities would shift, how my thinking would shift, and how I like I'm there for it. You know,
Hmm.
I'm happy to change my thinking. I'm happy to evolve and grow.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've been in like a nanny on the side since I was like 16. I'd always been around young kids and I thought that I was like so prepared to be a parent, and just like that transition when you have a child, it builds your confidence in ways that nothing else can explain. I've always loved education, and I've considered myself like a pretty smart in a lot of aspects in life. I know that I don't know everything, and I love to learn more. And becoming a parent helped build my confidence to really use my voice, to no longer like think that I had to earn my seat at the table, knowing that I deserved a seat at the table. And that's just something I can't explain to people who like aren't parents, because it's like it really changes you. Like you now have to be a voice for not only yourself but this like little human being who cannot express their needs and their wants, and they need you to protect them and to speak up for them. And it's like, yeah, I will do that without hesitation, and it's taught me to do it for myself too.
A place at the table. I love that.
Thanks.
That's like a you know, like an old saying that you know they would say in like in sports. You know,
Hmm.
if you can get, you know, if you get you know, a starting position, you know, hey, place at the table, baby,
Yeah.
giddy up, you know, and in business too, you know. So that's just I love that that analogy. Okay, so you crushed it. You know, you got
Yep.
going on now, but you started some type of nutrition degree
Yeah.
aside from Arizona
Yep, absolutely.
or public health.
Yeah, public health first. So, you know, that question, what do you really want to do? I knew I wanted to help people. I never really knew what public health was. So I started looking into different programs. Um, in my undergrad, I did a lot of online classes. It was during, you know, the pandemic. So everyone was home. We were doing Zoom classes. And honestly, I loved it. I loved being able to be at home, you know, maybe just like smoke a little joint, do my schoolwork, just like be in my vibing area. So I found a program through SNHU, and I chose to do like their global health track. I love everything that has to do with developing countries, seeing how it transitions into a developed country, the contrasts and issues. So yeah, I endeavored into that. I got pregnant about a year into that program. And like the crazy ambitious lady that I am, I started a second master's program. And it was through the original medical school I was going to go to. They started offering their master's in clinical nutrition online. And I received an email one day and I was like, yep, sign me up. I'm doing that. That's what I want to do. This was my dream med school. This is where I want to be. I want this education. So all throughout my pregnancy, I didn't take any time off. I did both my degrees. I was working full time. And then we had our daughter, and I had the amazing opportunity through a really wonderful grant that I received to now just be a full time student and finish both my degrees and get to be home with my daughter. and my family. And yeah, that's what I did. I just wrapped up my public health degree in December, and I'll be done with my nutrition one in 7 weeks. So
Pretty badass.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and like, I didn't know how old you were, and age doesn't matter, but I believe you're definitely younger than me.
Yeah, I am 24.
Giddy up. 24 years old, 3 degrees already, or we'll have 3 degrees in 7 weeks. That's incredible, Desiree. Now, that experience growing up, deciding that you're finding this freedom within yourself and taking your classes, getting some public health. I'm definitely going to touch back on some of that stuff about and some discussions later on the developing world and understanding that, because it has sometimes understanding global health, people don't realize the effect that we can have on each other or not. And that is a very precarious, sensitive relationship, I think, and should be dealt with care, probably. So that's cool. A grant, that's pretty cool that you were able to secure something like that.
Absolutely.
So is that something that you just like apply for and
Yep.
send in? You have to do some type of project based on.
Yeah. So basically, like, I've lived so many lives at only 24. I've done so many things on the side while school's been my like primary. But I did some work for a little while with a venture capitalist out in Colorado. And when I was working through my degrees, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to sustain working full time, having a child and doing 2 degrees, but I wasn't willing to give up 3 of those things. The only one I was willing to drop was my job. So I reached out to him, and he connected me with a donor, and it's a private grant. And I kind of just had to like essentially bend over backwards as grants do and explain why the intersection of what I was doing was so important, how I was planning to use this information and this knowledge moving forward in my life to help other people. I wrote like a bunch of mission statements. I had to submit previous work that I had done in my public health degree. And finally, bank statements, they want everything. And then finally, like, I got the okay. I think it was like late January, and I had my daughter 2 months later. So I was really like on the edge of my teeth, like just waiting to make sure I secured this. And I did, thankfully. And I just received my last portion of it. And yeah, it's been a lifesaver.
How long was it for?
It was for the duration. They back paid me for the duration of my entire nutrition degree. So it was like about 18 months. It was almost $100,000 grant. Yeah.
Yeah, girl.
Yeah.
Giddy up. How do we set Dr. BeeWell up to get one of these grants?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Let's go.
I can connect you with some of the donors out there. They're really amazing.
Please do it at some point, because I what I'm doing here and how I'm figuring out, like you said, I love how you said the intersection of things. So we do a couple of shows here. We do this show, Dr. BeeWell, and then we do another show called Shut Your Mouth, which is about like, we kind of gloves come off and we can talk about censorship a little bit more and talk about stuff, just topics that are, here I like to be well researched, and both of them I like to be as well researched as possible, and that's why I bring people on like you. And but with Shut Your Mouth, it's kind of more free, and that like, hey, I'm just kind of feeling this way or thinking this way, and I want to talk about it out loud because I think we should all talk about this out loud. Is this a real thing? And it can be from something like, talking about public policy and foreign policy to, we just did an episode on 9/11 and the Pentagon.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I'll definitely have to give that one a listen. I haven't heard it yet, but that's amazing.
and then too, we focus on a lot of people here in the Seacoast, and so just, another section of Dr. BeeWell is that we're going to start calling it the real Seacoast. And
I love that. That's so awesome. Heck yeah.
And so just bringing all the intersection of those things, the wellness, the community, and then being able to talk about those things, the no censorship. That's what I'm looking to, to put out into the world. And, it's amazing because it everything at first, right, is a slog, but then you start to get some momentum, and I have some wind at my back now. And so it's cool. And I'm excited. I'm excited to share the work with people. So
absolutely.
We'll have to get me a grant.
Yes, absolutely.
Giddy up. Cool. So that's an amazing experience, and goes to show like how you're the testament of what you were trying to build for yourself and for your family. And at what point did you get into the Postpartum Project, and when did that become more of your focus?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was newly postpartum, and I had to do an internship for my public health degree, and I wasn't really 100% sure what I wanted to do at first. Trying to really intersect just my education. I wanted to provide education through different providers at farmers markets. I thought that would be really amazing to have a booth with like an acupuncturist and a chiropractor and a psychologist, and just have them come and provide free education for people. And I needed to find an organization who would be willing to take that project on with me, knowing that I had no funding behind this. It would be solely volunteer based, and I needed an X amount of hours in order for my internship course. And I had reached out to a couple places. One was an amazing program called Birth Roots in Portland, and I actually did classes there when I was newly postpartum. They provide amazing resources and education and classes for parents, and they connected me with the director of the Postpartum Project. Her name's Brenda Emerson. She's been a midwife for over 30 years. She also owns Sacopee Valley Midwife. And yeah, we connected. I told her what my idea was, and me and her were able to really shift what I was planning on doing to a way that fit their needs. And yeah, so that's when I connected with them. I had to do 160 hours in the internship, and within a few hours of speaking with her, I absolutely fell in love with the work that they were doing. Yeah.
Did you end up doing the project where you provided this?
No, we didn't end up doing that project. Actually, what we did is we host free parent support groups twice a month, and we bring in different providers to those groups to speak with the parents and provide education, resources, and it's just a place for mainly moms who are postpartum to get together, share experience, and learn some new things that maybe they didn't know before.
Is it virtual?
We only do virtual when there's snowstorms, but they're all in person.
Ah, yes. Yeah. That's better.
Yeah, we bring the community. We're trying to really bring that community back and bridge that gap.
Yeah, it can be hard, but sometimes hard things are good, and that's one thing that we should all try to do in this world is get together and be with each other in person, especially at a time where you're talking about stuff like that. You know, we get so much from like being in people in the same space and sharing space with people. You pick up on so much that doesn't happen when you're just doing it virtually.
Absolutely. And we're all just in the weeds of motherhood. So children crying, diapers needing to be changed. It's hard to do that when you're on Zoom. You don't want to do it in case the baby needs something. But when we're all experiencing that together, it's like, okay, this is the beautiful aspect of community that we have lost. And we really need to foster and bring back, because it makes you feel like a person again.
Do the children come to the
Yep. Yeah, the children are there. Yeah. So we host one in Limerick, and it's actually at like a Montessori daycare, and so we use one of their rooms, and we all just meet. It's for 2 hours. We just had a sleep expert come at our last one, and talk about like infant sleep and just tips and tricks. I gave a mini nutrition class to one, and then our other one was in Bridgeton at the birth house. However, the birth house has closed down, and so now it's being moved to actually Tamworth, New Hampshire, and it will be provided over there.
I'm sure my wife would love to, be one of those people who comes and speaks and shares her expertise.
I would absolutely love that. I would love that.
Clinical pharmacist and in the insurance-based model, and which we can talk about, more a little bit later on. People doing, that's great. It's great that we have amazing birth centers that have, that trauma centers that can successfully deliver babies, and but I think that maybe sometimes we can overdo it too.
Absolutely.
So I definitely want to talk about that in a little bit. So you landed with the Postpartum Project, and that mission there is to increase compassionate care too, because there's a lot of women who, you tell me, there's a lot of women who go through this postpartum depression, and it's a little bit different than the just like the baby blues.
Absolutely.
Could you just tell the listeners what postpartum depression is, and what it might what you might look for? And
absolutely. So I really just it's like an umbrella term, really just like postpartum mood disorders, and that could be anything from postpartum anxiety to depression to even postpartum OCD and rage. And so when things are harder, obviously having a new kid is really hard, but when things are harder than they normally are, whether that be you're staying up watching your child breathe at night because you're worried that they're going to stop breathing, or, it's like over 80% of new parents have intrusive thoughts. But when those intrusive thoughts start to really control your life, when it's hard for you to do things like take a shower for yourself, to eat for yourself, when maybe it's even hard for you to interact with your child. Early intervention is the most important thing. And so asking for help, I know from speaking with a lot of parents, a really big worry up for a lot of them is like, well, I don't want to tell my provider because I don't want like DHHS to come. I don't want CPS to be called on me. And just, I really want people to know that providers, your pediatrician, your PCP, your OBGYN, they aren't here to like tell on you as long as there's no safety risk to you or your child. So if you're having intrusive thoughts, like I had them when I was newly postpartum, like I couldn't get on my porch. I'm like, oh God, my daughter's going to fly out of my arms off the porch. I'm going to have to like jump off the porch, spiral, catch her, and we'll all be safe. And our porch is on the second floor. So like, how would we all be safe in that? But when those start to like really take over and you're like, oh no, like I can't even go near the door on the porch and things like that, that's when you need to seek out and get some help. I've been in therapy since I was 7, but I started back up when I think I was like 2 or 3 months postpartum, and it's been transformative getting that early care. So yeah, just like really looking out for like when things are starting to inhibit your everyday life, when it feels like more than just like a little bit of worry. Like everyone worries about their children, but when it's like, oh no, I'm staying up like all night making sure they're still breathing, or I haven't tried to feed them like solid foods yet because I'm really worried they're going to choke, and that's like inhibiting me moving on to this next step that's so crucial for them. That's when you need to seek out help and just tell somebody, even if it starts as like somebody that you really trust who's close in your life. Just letting the people in your life know that you're struggling is like a major step, and it's like really hard to do, but it's so important. And then moving on to more care, and just like telling your OB, researching a therapist. There's amazing resources on Postpartum Support International. They have free support groups. They have therapist contacts on there. And yeah, getting that early intervention is so important.
We all know how important strength training is for long-term health, but it can be hard to know where to start. I was in the same spot a year ago. You want to make sure you're doing exercises right, avoiding injury, and getting results, but it's easy to feel lost without a plan. That's when I found On Target Fitness. At On Target, you get a custom strength program, personalized attention in a small group setting, and the nutrition coaching you need for real lasting change. And the year I've been working out there, I've gotten stronger, more mobile, and more confident. My form has improved, and even something as simple as walking feels better. The group energy keeps me motivated, and every workout is fun. On Target just opened a new location in Kingston. Now you've got even more options to experience their amazing approach. If you're ready for lasting change, head to www.ontargetfit.com and schedule your session today.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds great. I do want to, it sounds amazing, and I love the early intervention aspect of it. I do want to ask, because I know that a pediatrician, an OB, a therapist, their job is not to take your kids away from you.
Mm-hmm.
But I have talked to folks where I've seen some pretty heinous situations where it's like, yo, man, those are people that are just, they don't have the same resources as other folks do. So this situation happened, maybe the kid was left alone for a half hour at 7 or 8 years old. I'll tell you what, I was left alone at 6, for hours, and I had older siblings and stuff, but that they were off doing their own thing sometimes. So it's like, and sometimes they were gone, so it's, I do agree with you where it is that, right. But it's also like, there's weed everywhere right now, for instance. And if if your kid gets into some weed and you bring them, so many parents won't take their kid to the hospital because they're going to get in trouble,
Absolutely,
for that. And it is different, I mean, I guess I wasn't 5 or 6 when that happened, but when I was, 12 or 13 and I'm getting into the beers, and we're all getting sick from it, maybe one of the person needs to go to the hospital. It's like, it's kind of changed where I feel like I don't know. I just want the system to be good for people and to make sure that like if people are trying their hardest, let's help them try their hardest and help them keep their kids and help them get through it and not put them into this system where they're, where the system is created to, who knows what the system's created for, maybe some nefarious purposes.
Yeah, and the system is not perfect. A really good friend of mine is a social worker in Maine, and she works with like DHHS and CPS and everything, and the system isn't perfect. And there are a lot of gaps in the system, my understanding is like if we can prevent the harm and death of a child, even if at times maybe things aren't perfect. I mean, I would.
I agree with you, but that's how we take liberties away from people, I feel
Yeah,
like.
and like maybe
know?
systems where like there's more checks and balances. I think that creating community is a really good way that we support people without having to take their kids away from them. We get them the resources that they need, and we get them the help that they need. And when we've created such an isolated community, it's really hard to help others. Like if
I
you're,
agree there.
yeah, if you get a break, like if you're overwhelmed or you need someone to watch, having that community to be like, hey, can you watch my kid for an hour? Or like, maybe I'm struggling this month and I can't make ends meet. Like, is there any way that there's a system in place to help people without being like, well, you can't provide for your child and taking them away? Because I do think that there is a lot of abuse in these systems. But from the people I know who work in these systems, they're not nefarious themselves.
Right,
They really
yeah.
care about like kids not being harmed.
For
and
sure.
in that there is like I just met you in person. I've been talking to you for a while, but I just met you in person. So like, I don't know like the ins and out of who you are as a human being. And it's very similar in these systems where it's like, well, I'm just seeing this on paper. Like, I don't know who you are in and out as a human being. And with that, there's a lot of fear. And that on both sides, like there's fear on the provider side being like, well, I don't want the child to be harmed. And there's a lot of fear on the parent side being like, well, I don't want the provider to take my child away, or I don't want the system to break up my family. And I think that that creates a lot of like tension, which can be misconstrued. Like, I think it's just fear. It's fear, and maybe somebody's apprehensive to answer questions, or they're apprehensive to comply with what they're asking for. And in the same sense, maybe like a provider's like overstepping, and they're not seeing like this parent is afraid you're going to take their child away. And that's why they're like meeting you with so much rebuttal, and they don't want to comply with what you're asking because they're afraid.
Yeah. I think it comes back to community. Like you said, if the social worker, knows the family because they live in the same community and they see each other at the grocery store sometimes, or they, they interact because their children interact or whatever, then there's going to be a more of an understanding and knowing the person like, oh yeah, that this person, there was a mistake made. A mistake was made, and this is, we don't have to end this person's life or put them into a system that is very hard to get out of once you start it, once you pull the plug. It's
absolutely.
So yeah, I think that I think we're definitely on the same page there, which is great. Increasing care for people. So you went through some postpartum stuff yourself,
Yeah, absolutely.
From your own experience. And I think every woman does to some extent. And like, I think you made a great distinction of like when because I saw it with my wife too, it's like you have the interest. I had some of the intrusive thoughts, but if they become too much and they're affecting your mental health and affecting the way that you're sleeping and taking care of the baby, then that's when it's a good time to, to get that early intervention. And
absolutely.
And you guys provide that at Postpartum Project, right? Like, and it's for people who don't have, might not have the income because that's the other thing too. Like, a doula is great, right? A doula is great to have, for would you call it prepartum? What do you call it?
Like prenatal.
Prenatal,
yeah, prenatal,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so like a prenatal, doula and the postpartum doulas are like really wonderful. And they're both, both very necessary. The cost of that type of service, usually ranges from somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000.
Absolutely.
It's quite a bit of money. Sometimes that's, if a person's making $100,000, that's, 1/20th of their salary.
Absolutely.
To pay for. That's a lot of money. So, it's great that we're providing it for. For people, and they have to just be rural Maine and have some type of income level. Is that what it is?
So we offer something called the CARE Grant. And so basically we work primarily right now in rural Oxford and New York counties, and low-income families can apply for this grant. And we use a lottery system to choose from the applications after we've reviewed them and make sure they fall within the like economic criteria and they live within the areas and communities we're serving. But yeah, we focus on the rural areas and kind of like decreasing those barriers to access to care. When you live in like a rural place in Maine, it can be anywhere from 45 minutes to over an hour and a half to get to like even an emergency room. So that decreases a lot of mothers and families from seeking out postpartum care, even going to like their 6-week appointment. Ooh. And so we're trying really hard to like bridge that and like have early interventions if there's any feeding difficulties with the child, to help with breastfeeding support. Our doulas know when to refer out if there are issues, who to connect those families to the specific providers that are going to help them. And like just being there to support them, whether like the mom just like needs a shower, needs someone to watch the baby, has like another child and needs someone to like help take care of that child, like housekeeping, issues. Even like we have like a $500 like stipend for food and meals for those families. So, just really trying to look at all aspects of what makes up the postpartum time and addressing those areas.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a community who might be just above that in an income level that's being underserved? I feel this way a lot about a lot of things that we focus on the bottom 5% or the bottom 10% of people, and I agree that we should absolutely do that. But what happens is that next 25 to 35% of human beings who still wouldn't be able to come up with $500 if they had a medical emergency or they needed tires. And I feel like I'm probably like right in that maybe in the next 5 or 10% after that, where it's like I'm not 1 month or 2 months, 3 months behind, where things would struggle. But if things got hard, then maybe we, things would get more difficult. And I worry about those people a lot. I worry about those people. I feel like those people are helping to drive society and helping to, and they're being forgotten about.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree. I do think like kind of like that middle class and middle lower class, they definitely get left out a lot. Our income requirements are pretty diverse. We're not like just specifically targeting the lowest.
Okay.
Yeah. So we do try to expand. Really what we're looking for is like the rural aspect. That's like one of the most important things, because it's so far. You're so far from like anything, from receiving services. But we have like a pretty big range of incomes that people fall within that criteria of. It's not like just people, because there are a lot of programs for people in those really low income, like TAMP, food stamps, WIC, things like that.
Yeah.
And then once you get above a certain income, that's no longer available to you. So we are inclusive of those. And there are other really great organizations like Community Dulo, and they provide sliding scale. So theirs is just all in a sliding scale based on your income. Their income requirements are also pretty diverse to try to decrease those barriers, because like you said, I really do think that like little space is left out, and because they're maybe above a threshold, they can't get like some aid
because they can pay their rent.
Exactly.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, like
they can pay their rent and they can feed their family.
Yeah, and that's it.
And that's it, right?
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. And sometimes having to make decisions whether like to buy this or that.
Absolutely.
No vacations.
No vacations. No emergency funds. Probably pretty high credit card debt, just trying to get themselves out of some of these issues. The medical debt is probably out of this world. They don't qualify for like a Medicaid. Their premiums on their health insurance, if they're even like able to keep health insurance. There's
feels
just
like we need to help these people more,
absolutely.
Right? Like we need to create better systems that these people can rise above. And because what a shame, right? What a shame that exists.
Absolutely.
I try not to get too emotional about it, because it is in my life, and the way that I see it is. It's pretty much all a class war. It's always the haves versus the have-nots. And trying to figure that out, and the have-nots, a lot of times struggle, and the people who truly have nothing, they really struggle, but they're put into a system where they can help them to some extent, but doesn't always, it doesn't always help. Seems like what you guys are doing is pure good, is a pure giddy up.
Yeah, that's what we're really trying to do. We're really trying to bring community back, connect people to the people that can help them, and like address that gap, because there's just such a gap in care, especially in the postpartum period. Postpartum parents and families just get forgotten, especially in Maine right now. We're facing a huge crisis of maternity wards closing down, and that's putting so much strain on the system. We've had 9 hospitals close down their maternity wards, and 4 just in this year will close. Mothers and families are looking at driving anywhere from 45 minutes to 3 hours to give birth. Maine doesn't currently reimburse. Most midwives, they don't reimburse doula care. Like, what are we doing? This is just in Maine. Across the country, 500 maternity wards have closed. Like, what is happening right now in America for parents is terrifying, and it is going to lead to more deaths, higher cesarean rates, longer NICU stays, poor outcomes for families. It's really terrifying. And if we can do our little part to help those parents, we will. But we're just a small number in the grand scheme of things. And that's why I advocate for people getting out there and looking up the local legislation and pushing these massive hospitals who can just close down maternity wards with no question, no rhyme, no reason. And they aren't at fault. They don't get held at fault for it. That's like, how can you do that to a community?
Is that why it's not profitable business for them? Which is, to me, seems wild, because from my understanding, maternity wards are some of the most profitable places for hospitals.
Yeah, absolutely. They're claiming that they're not profitable. I am going to call cap as loudly as I can. That was 100% cap. I just gave birth at Mercy Northern Lights. I have amazing health insurance, thankfully, but I looked at the bill my health insurance received, and it was over $45,000. I had no complications. My daughter didn't need a NICU stay. That was $45,000. Now, like, my best friend gave birth at the same hospital and she needed an emergency C-section. I can only imagine what her bill was. So you cannot tell me these are not profitable. If it costs $10,000 for a C-section, and they're billing an insurance company like upwards of $70,000-$80,000. Tell me how you're not making money. How is that not a profitable business?
Right. Yeah, that's I really wonder about it, why they're going away from it. Maybe, this will be a good question for my wife, because there are these birth centers. I brought this up with her, and I was, and when I brought it up with her, this is funny, sorry to call you out, Kayla, but she was like, oh, what does that mean? What does a birthing center mean, Steve? Because she's like Wentworth Douglas, insurance-based model, clinical pharmacist. This is how we do birth, Me, I'm like, hey, maybe we should try this home birth thing, like that, but that's kind of where I line up, like we can, she doesn't believe that, so when I asked her, like, what is a birthing center? Like, what does that mean when you say 9 are going to close, 9 hospitals that have maternity wards are going to close?
So right now I'm just talking about maternity wards at hospitals. When we get into,
you're not talking about the woo-woo stuff.
No, I'm not even talking about the woo-woo stuff, but that's like even more scarce. The one in Bridgeton, they just closed down. They were a midwife school and a birthing center with like a pool. The midwives, people would come and give birth there if they didn't want to do a home birth. They closed down. And we're just seeing this like across the board. And then there's like even bigger issues. There was just, I was just reading a case study, and it happened in Massachusetts, and a midwife transferred their patient because there were complications, as they should, as they are required to the hospital. And 12 hours after the patient got there, they had really, really bad bleeding. After they had the child, like, the midwife handed off care, and 12 hours later. And then the hospital didn't want to be at fault. And so they were trying to like frame a malpractice suit on the midwife when the patient had been in the hospital for 12 hours. Like, how is that the midwife's fault? And like, there's just,
we live in a litigious society.
Absolutely.
Right? Everyone's looking, and that's the insurance, the insurance-based model where you have to cover your ass every single second, and you have to create systems and processes that don't actually work for people, because you have to, put your DSM-5 code in correctly when the person, actually needs a different type of care. It's super worrisome that many birthing centers are closing, and people don't have access to that in Maine. 45 minutes, I said I was, we live in Dover. It's like, right in Wentworth Douglas. It's right there. Like, what an experience that was. It was really nice. And for the most part, for the most part, it was amazing. It was an amazing experience, and they took care of us, took care of my wife, took care of the baby. They have around the clock care. That's great. So I think everybody, if they want to do it that way, they deserve that. So it is really scary. That's scary that's happening, because we do want to have the best system in place for babies to be born. That's what that's the future of any people. The future of our country, the future of our people, the future of everything. Our essence. It's within them. So yeah, it's interesting. You know, what do you think we can do to like besides the advocacy stuff of showing up? Because like you said, yeah, it's great if a couple of moms and a couple of dads show up to the town hall in Limerick and Gray and you know in Oxford and say, hey, we want a birthing center. Is that the way? That's the you know because there's so many forces to play that want to stamp out for this business for this reason for you know for whatever.
Absolutely. We can, this is just my personal opinion, not an opinion of anything that I'm affiliated with at all. But we can just start pushing back against the system. We can start boycotting hospitals. If you're like a low risk pregnancy, opt for a home birth, opt for a birthing center. Like, and we have to twist the knife, and we have to force their hand, and we have to also tell them that this is not okay. Like, start protesting outside the hospitals, like start calling the hospitals and complaining. Like, we have to stop as a society just getting an answer and being like, okay, well, it just is the way it is. That's just the way the system is. Like, that's gotten us to these crises that we're currently seeing by just being like, well, that's how the system is. It's just how things work. Like, no, that's like boomer language. Like, we're not just going to accept that anymore. Like, we can't accept that anymore. That's not acceptable anymore.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I say push back against the system, have a home birth, you know, hire a midwife. A lot of midwives will work on a payment plan. There is a lot of legislation currently in Maine trying to force Medicaid to reimburse doulas, to reimburse midwives, and that's currently being seen. And so, you know, just submitting your stories, you can submit written testimony, and it has to be entered in as testimony when there's reading about these bills and they're talking about the bills in the office. So just doing things like that, protesting the hospitals, not going to the hospitals, like, and to really, when it comes to birth in general, like shifting our mindset, it's not an emergency situation unless it is.
Cannabis products are becoming more popular every day. Whether you're looking for the best night's sleep, trying to mitigate daily stress, or just trying to enjoy some laughter with friends, OG Cannabis is the store for you. OG Cannabis has an unbiased approach that is unique and simple. Unlike the competition, they don't sell their own manufactured products, but instead proudly showcase the best vendors across Maine. A dispensary like no other. Come and visit today at 18 American Way, Elliott, Maine. OG Cannabis. Oh, and don't forget to use my promo code, Dr. BeeWell. See you guys there. Giddy up.
Like, birth is a physiological thing that happens, and it's not an emergency situation. So it may be, as long as you're low risk and there aren't issues, it doesn't need to happen in a hospital. You know, like, men are the ones that kind of like set that up. Like, they got rid of midwives. Like, there were midwives who were slaves, and they would birth all the children. And when they started to free the slaves, a lot of, like, just happens to be like a lot of white men did not like that aspect anymore. They didn't want free African-American slaves to be be the ones that are birthing the babies. And so what they did is they were like, nope, now we do it in hospitals, and only like obstetricians are the ones that can deliver the babies, and women are going to give birth on their backs. And then they started pushing like epidurals and cesarean sections because it was more convenient. And when you look at countries like Norway, Sweden, even like Switzerland, and a lot of different ones in the European Union, they have midwife-driven birthing centers, and they have some of the best outcomes in the world for like women. Like, they are having
better outcomes than we have here?
Yeah, America has horrible outcomes.
Well, how does that mean? I know that back in 1902, you know, there was probably like a 3 out of 4, 75%. I'm throwing these numbers out here. You might actually know that. I'm just saying, like, 75% survival rate in infancy.
Yeah. So when we're looking at outcomes,
let's talk not even infancy. Let's talk strictly childbirth.
Yeah.
You know?
So when we're looking at strictly childbirth, like, what we're seeing is like America has of a developed country, which, like, we can define developed country however we want, but of a developed country, we have the highest cesarean, like, C-section rate.
Yeah, I think that's profit driven. That's
absolutely.
There's more money, so the hospitals say if there's any sign of doing a cesarean, we're going to do it.
Absolutely,
because we're going to get paid more.
100%. And in that, like, you have bigger risk of complications. We have some of the highest maternal mortality rates, and maternal mortality means anything from like hemorrhaging after birth to like taking your own life due to like postpartum depression. But we have some of the worst of a developed country. And when you look at these across the board, it's like, why is this happening here in America? We are a profit driven place. So like if there's any sign of an issue, they're going to schedule a C-section. With all the closing of these maternity wards, they're going to start scheduling more C-sections because they need to make birth convenient. They need to have it planned. And with that, there's just an increased risk infection. Like, there's just like a lot of different.
The baby doesn't get the juice.
Yeah, the baby's not getting the juice. Like the mother's going to be sicker. It's going to be harder to recover.
The mother's not going to, going to feel like she didn't do her job in some cases,
Absolutely.
Like she failed, which is fucking horseshit.
Yeah, and just the societal pressures around it, like to bounce right back to go, we don't have paid maternity leave. Like it's not a required thing across the country. Like there are some states that have really amazing paid maternity leave. There are some places like different
Massachusetts.
Yeah, there are some different jobs you can work for too that have really great policies, but that's not across the board, across the country. So like some women have to go back to return to work as soon as like 4 weeks after a C-section.
Insane.
Like that, even before you've had your
Major
6-week
surgery.
checkup. Yeah, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And it's really sad to see. And we are a developed country where why are our rates so bad? We've just shifted away from like,
I think it's the profit center stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like,
absolutely.
I hate to put it on. Yes, there's some vile shit that white men did, right? And a few white men that did it.
Mm-hmm.
But I would also argue that if white men didn't get into maternal, then maybe we wouldn't. We're pretty advanced at it now. Like you said, back in 100 years ago, we were at like a half of the clip that we're at now. 75% of it. Now we're delivering more babies safely, whether we're doing that in the right way, but via cesarean and all this. I think that we obviously went too far in one direction. And what you're talking about, I just hate to vilify. It happens a lot, and too, like, and I don't know, I this is a separate podcast, and I'd love to do it with you sometime, but like the white guilt that exists just for being a white person. Like,
no, absolutely. I don't think that we should like put it on like you as a white man, like it's your fault that like C-section rates are that high. But I do think that we have to acknowledge that there were white men in power who put these systems in place, and maybe it's time we review these systems and we stop just accepting them for what they are, because there are better ways for these things to happen. When you look at like Norway and you look at Sweden, and they are primarily midwife-driven birthing centers, and they have very low cesarean section rates. They have very low postpartum mood disorder rates. They have great maternal outcomes. And you look at other places like South Korea or even Japan, where like after you give birth, you go into like basically this amazing spa hotel with your child, and women are helping take care of you and your child, and you're having a space to recover. That's amazing. In America, they're like, oh, you gave birth, head out the hospital in 2 days, and you got to figure it out for yourself. And we'll see you in 6 weeks just to make sure everything's healing correctly. And you're probably going to have to go back to work before that. And it decreases like the rates of breastfeeding. And and breastfeeding is so beneficial in so many different ways. Like I'm not yes, people say fed is best. I'm really not a fed is best girly. Like breast milk is liquid gold. It is really amazing. And there are so many barriers that are causing women to not be successful in their breastfeeding journeys. And it's like profit driven. It's get back to work. It's, well, your insurance company isn't going to cover a lactation consultant, and maybe it's going to be $1,000 to see them and figure out what's wrong. And maybe your kid has a tongue tie. So now we're going to make you go get surgery for that. So you're going to have to work harder to like afford that surgery. Like it's all profit driven, but breast milk is liquid gold. And in other countries, they're helping women breastfeed. They want women to breastfeed. And we're just not seeing that here in America. And it helps with healing. It increases oxytocin. Like there's so many benefits to not only the child, but also the mother.
I love throwing the breast milk right in the eyes.
Yeah.
It's like his eyes are a little goopy.
Yeah, exactly.
Giddy up, little breast milk.
Exactly. Like the ears are like a little bit red. Like breast milk will help. The kid starts to get a little bit of sniffles. Breast milk will help. Like even I start to get cold. Like throw some of that colostrum in my coffee and I'm ready to go.
If my I'd sneak it sometimes, put it in my smoothie. But my wife, she it was the liquid gold. So that's Emmett. That's Emmett's. That's not yours.
Yeah.
Get away from that. A bag breaks here and there. But I agree. Like what what a horrible system. And even it's great that if you want to empower women and they want to go and pump and do their thing and do that. It's like my wife would have to look at pictures of the baby so she could pump so that she could produce enough milk and at least at first. And it's like that's horseshit. Like, and we were actually lucky enough that, we have a daycare that's at the hospital where my wife can go, and every fucking job that employs women should strive to have this as a fucking thing.
Absolutely.
That she was able to go and feed the baby, at least once a day. And that's everything. Like, that's a beautiful thing. And I'm glad that that's happening at the hospital. But guess what? Wentworth Douglas sold to Brigham and Women's, to MGB, Mass General Brigham. And this hospital, the women who are watching my son right now today have been there, some of them 35 years, 30 years, 32 years, 25 years. These are the people who you want taking care of your children. They are in it. They know what's good. They know how to do this. And I feel like, the hospital, maybe as it gets more corporate and profit driven, this is, we pay a great rate. They help feed the son. They do all this stuff. And as profit goes in, they're definitely losing money on this one,
Yeah.
And for not to be, this is what we should be subsidizing, instead of subsidizing all the corn in the world and all this other bullshit, let's subsidize this stuff for mothers. That's my bit on it.
Absolutely. We need, and also, like, Tesla doesn't make a profit. So, like, if large companies can make subsidies and not make a profit, and they're like kind of incentivized to break even, then it's okay if we like lose some money, if it means helping families succeed, if it means improving family outcomes. Like, who cares if a big hospital loses some money? You know what I mean? And that's like the thing that it's like, well, they don't see that. They don't. Well, they care.
They have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to not do that.
Absolutely.
Yes, if it's a privately held company, or a, in that case, they have the fiduciary responsibility to their private shareholders. And if it's a publicly held company, then they definitely hold complete fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. And that means that if it's better for them not to have this system or to cut costs, that's what they'll do.
Yeah.
We need to fight back against that as humans, to create, I love what you're saying about the community birthing centers. I think that that's amazing. I think that we should have more of those, where people can go but I think it's deeper than that, because like the insurance-based model is like trying to do that, right? Like, so at Wentworth Douglas, for instance, you don't have, the person who delivers your baby is technically a certified midwife, until something, unless there's a complication, right? And then at that point, you'll have an MD, an OBGYN come in and, deliver that baby. And so they're trying to do that. And that was definitely great. You felt it a little bit, you felt it a little bit, that the midwife was a little bit more, less surgically, intervention and wants you to have your birth and have your birth plan and all that. But, it's not, it feels like it's kind of like they're still confined by the system. The same as like anybody can go get physical therapy or acupuncture or, even massage at some of these places now. And the practitioners that I see there, that I have seen there, because I do have the MGB insurance, have been amazing. But sometimes, you might not get that level of care, because it all comes down to who the practitioner is and how they feel that they can deliver on their job, in the whatever 45 minutes of time that you have allotted. And I do understand that we need to create systems that work for everybody. Like, there's a lot of us, right? We do need to be efficient. I think maybe not with this one, right? Not with like you said it great. It's not an emergency experience, which it can be. It can be. So that's why it's like 45 minutes to 3 hours. I feel like if I was 45 minutes in an emergency, that's bad. But even being 2 hours away from a birthing center would have been okay for the birth, just the birth.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, getting back for the 6-week appointment or anything like that, that's not, once you're in the thick of it, you're in the thick of it. But I agree that we, having those systems set up would be better. And it's sad that, what are the 4 hospitals that are closing?
I know MDI is closing down. The one in Waldoboro County is closing down. Northern Lights in, I want to say Waterville, they are closing down, and then I can't remember who the 4th one is. But yeah, then that's just this year alone. So
yeah, it's too much. It's too much. So another thing that I was curious to ask you about is, like, you have an online presence, a pretty robust online presence, and you mix your personal life in with your job.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing for people to do, and I feel like you do a really good job of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, like, do you, how do you, balance that? How do you balance sharing your personal stories with your professional journey?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a hard one. And it takes a lot of revision and reflection to kind of figure out how I was going to navigate it. For a long time, like my social media was really just like my personal social media. Like I'm sharing pictures on vacation and like at this event and that event, and that was just kind of what it was. And then it was right around the time I had my daughter, that I really started to hone in, and I was like, I see this huge market on social media, and I'm not sure what I want to do. Like, if I want to be a nutritionist in an office, I want to open up my own office, but like me myself, I can be a brand and I can market that. I have a lot of knowledge, and every single day I'm gaining more knowledge, and I love to have great conversations, and I'm also not afraid to admit when I'm wrong on something or maybe I don't know something. And I think that people connect really well with that when you're able to like bring in your own stories and humanity and things that are going on in your own personal life. They're able to connect with that more. And so yeah, one day like I just started being like, you know what, like I've been told to be quiet like my whole life, and I'm not going to be anymore. I only have one life to live, and so I'm going to do it loudly. And if people don't like that, that's okay. But I've been met with a lot of really great response to that. I did make a decision. Like at first, I was sharing pictures of my daughter on Instagram, and that was something very early on I decided to stop doing because I do think it is important to protect children online, not only their digital footprint, but also from predators online. In the age of AI, I just don't want my daughter's face out there for people to see. So I do share about my daughter on there, but you will not see her face. And that's just something that I feel really good about. And I do advocate for other people to do because the digital footprint you're creating for your child is going to last their lifetime. And there are just so many predators, and AI is really scary. And so just trying to protect your children the best you can. So yeah, I try to mix in some things of with me and my like my life and what we're doing, but to do it in a very strategic way that also protects my daughter.
Yeah, I go back and forth on that a lot, right? I generally don't share pictures of my son just because I kind of feel that way,
Mm-hmm.
but my wife does it, and I like I like the pictures, when I see
Mm-hmm.
them, and I see, like I not like I hit the like button. I
Yeah.
emotionally like them, and that's a tough thing because I don't. It feels like it's wrong, but it feels like what we should be sharing this, and it would be wonderful if it could be community. It would be good if you know I'm just gonna say it. It would be good if I could get every single one of those predators, put them in this warehouse, and then set the warehouse on fire.
100%.
Yeah, yep.
100%.
So then children could live and be happy
And be safe and be
yeah.
free. But that's just the internet is not a safe place.
No,
And
4% of psychopath. 4% of us are walking around psychopath.
exactly.
So it's like, yeah, it's not safe, and
Yeah.
anybody yeah, it's not safe, and there's so much nefariousness out there. It just,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I
yuck.
do think that there's definitely like a fine line to walk there. Like if your Instagram's private and it's just people you know that are on there, then I do think like if you want to share to the people you know, like that's a different situation. But when you have a public presence, there is just a level, and this is going to sound like a really brash term, but there's just a level of child exploitation that comes into play because if you want to admit it or not, there are child predators out there, and they're seeking out that kind of content. They're seeking out that what you might think is like an innocent video of your child in the pool or even just walking down the road, and they're doing it for nefarious reasons. And that's out there, and it's alive, and it's so, so, so active. So I think that it's a fine line to walk, but I think when you have a public presence, you have to think extra hard about what you're sharing when it comes around your children because it's a scary place.
Yeah, it's a scary place, and there's so much chance for manipulation, and you mentioned like it's kind of like consent, right? Like the child can't consent to this, and
Hmm.
they, and like we need informed consent, and most people don't have informed consent. Like you could even say that to them, like, hey, there's predators out there, but they don't actually like get that, or they don't see it because it hasn't happened in their life yet, or
Hmm.
they haven't had any experience with it, because it's another thing that we probably don't talk about enough if it does happen to you or happen to your children or whatever. Um, but informed consent with children is like a thing that I do want to talk to you about.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
ready to get
Yeah,
into it a little bit?
I'm ready to get into
Okay,
it.
okay, because I on your Instagram I've seen some things, and I actually don't know where you fall on some of these things. I'm a I'm a pharmacist by trade who learned a certain way in school, and then went through the COVID pandemic, and that really opened up my eyes to the way that my eyes had already been opened in terms of mainstream medicine and how pharmaceuticals, were being overprescribed to people.
Mm-hmm.
But I never ever questioned vaccines really. I had said that this is you talked earlier about developing nations and third world countries, and if you want to see some devastation, go check out a disease that we would think is simple and see how it can devastate a third world country. That is a real thing, or from at least what I've been told. At least what
absolutely.
I've been told and what I've learned in school. But COVID was a bunch of bullshit, and last year they inoculated 9 million children on the COVID vaccine schedule. So the fact that one is on the schedule, tells me, and knowing what these pharmaceutical companies, being intimately involved with them, working for them, knowing that profit is always put first, and getting on the schedule is if you have to tell right when you come into this world, you have to get this shot or you can't exist, and you can't do things in life that other people can do, and things are going to get harder for you. That's a great way to make money. That's a great system to have in place. And COVID, like I said, the fact that COVID, which is the thing that little children are, weren't negatively being affected by, they weren't dying, unless they were sick. We've seen studies that it was actually only effective for people who were 70 years old or older that had comorbidities, and those maybe we should have developed it for them maybe. So it's lost so much. I've lost so much trust in the system further, and COVID has. So I'm really interested what you think about how parents do they have enough information about consent, about about medical information, about what's out there, about what they have to put in their child's body, and just where do you kind of land on that that stance?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, I think that COVID was a hoax. I think that was also a really, really great vessel to create so much distrust in the medical community. And it really ruined a lot of things that we had in place. And it did open up a lot of people's eyes, obviously, for how easily it is for profit-driven companies to pull the wool over your eyes and tell you that they're coming to help. And under the guise of like a national emergency, of a global pandemic, right? But I do think that it also created an environment for people to think that they are experts when they do not understand, and they have not had the ability to professionally expand their understanding for things like virology, immunology, and sciences that take a long time to fully grasp. A lot of people have just become Google experts. They pick and choose what they take out of a research study, and they aren't able to fully grasp like what science is. You know what I mean? Like nothing is proven. Like there's just support for a thesis, or a thesis is not supported. Science is not an absolute truth. It is always evolving, and that's why it's beautiful, wonderful, amazing. And in that, we should constantly be reforming our stances on things. It shouldn't be like when we talk about vaccines, like they tell women when you give birth, like you need to give this eye gel, they need hepatitis B, and they need vitamin K. I'm a huge supporter of vitamin K. I do think vitamin K is really important. Obviously, there is only a small percentage of children that have those brain bleeds. But when they have those brain bleeds, they are catastrophic. And I do think it is important. But hepatitis B, unless you're an IV drug user, or you are hepatitis B positive, or your spouse is hepatitis B positive, there is no reason why you're giving a child that was just born hepatitis B. And we need to inform people on this. We need to really be teaching them, like, yeah, we can't lie and say that it didn't significantly help the population that it was targeted towards, but to put it as a blanket, like common practice, is where we've really gone wrong. hepatitis B will help people. It did help people when hepatitis B was such an issue because women were unaware of their status for hepatitis B. They weren't being.
I don't mean to interrupt
Yeah.
you. It was a tiny population.
It was a smaller population, but it was a population that has been ignored, greatly overlooked. It was underreported in minority communities. It was a bigger issue in minority communities than what was reported, just because of the basis that minority communities are overlooked. And
probably more going on there too. To be honest, and
absolutely.
not that again, are white people to blame for this?
No.
I don't know. No,
Yeah.
hear me out. Maybe they are. Who the fuck knows? But there's certain minority communities that live in this, that don't have the same ideals as other communities in terms of their marriage, in terms of don't get me wrong. There's plenty of white guys who are cheating like crazy, but historically there have other minorities have done that and have so that's also another there was definitely being underserved, definitely being undercared, but there's also like obviously two sides to all stories, and there's that was who knows whose fault that is, and that's probably systemic trauma that exists and like whatever, but at the same time that was another thing where maybe they didn't know that they were hepatitis B because they had multiple partners and
Absolutely.
they had multiple fathers to a baby.
And just other things like, we know as a society that like the crack epidemic disproportionately affected Black communities in America. And we also have seen, I'm not an expert on these.
It was forced on Black communities in America by the CIA.
And I'm not an expert on these things, but I could guarantee that a similar pattern is with the overprescribing of opioids in America. And when you do not have access to opioids, a lot of times people turn to IV drug use, whether it's blues or heroin, which is now just like fentanyl, and they're sharing needles. They're not, and if somebody has hepatitis B and they share a needle with another person who doesn't have hepatitis B, now they have hepatitis B, then they're going home to their girlfriend or their wife, and their girlfriend or wife doesn't know that they have a drug issue. Now she has hepatitis B and she doesn't know, and then she goes to go give birth. Like there are just these issues are not black and white. There's so much gray area, and there's so many, it's like 20 different cups that are making up one issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so like when we look at them, we have to like always keep in mind that there are so many different things that are making up these issues. And again, like moving on to like hepatitis B in general, like it did help, but they took like Big Pharma took that, they took the little bit that it did help, and they exploited that into a system where now they're forcing it on women, saying, well, you don't want your kid to get hepatitis B, right? And it's like, well, I'm not an IV drug user. I already got tested during pregnancy for hepatitis B. I don't have it. My partner, I'll have them get tested too if it's really that big of a deal. And if we don't have hepatitis B, we don't use IV drugs. Why does my child need to have hepatitis B vaccine?
Yeah, why does it need to get clarithromycin, right? And an antibiotic put into its eyes immediately upon birth. These are great questions. If you went to, go have that you should. I would love to put you up. We're going to do this, I think, is do some type of panel, and I would love to put you up with some of these people who would, look you in the face and tell you that it's the most necessary thing in the world and that you're harming your child if you don't give them this hepatitis B shot.
Mm-hmm.
Like any clinician who thinks that, is wrong. They're
Mm-hmm.
wrong. They're actually they're dead wrong. And we can't even talk about that in this country.
No.
If I talk about that, if I talk about COVID, sure, I have some questions about MMR as well. I have some other questions about some of the other vaccines now. But even if I just said that I don't want my son to get COVID, I don't want him to get hepatitis B, I would be looked at as an anti-vaxxer.
Mm-hmm.
An anti-vaxxer, and people in my old profession would, potentially end their relationship with me.
Mm-hmm.
Not even, that's pretty wild. Let me introduce you to Elevate, a premium functional mushroom company focused on supporting your highest potential. They offer a range of powerful supplements crafted from the finest medicinal fungi designed to naturally enhance your well-being. Elevate carries everything from mushroom tinctures, capsules, and teas to their delicious mushroom-infused coffees. All of their products are made with USA-grown mushrooms and contain only wild medicinal mushrooms, no psychoactive compounds. I personally use their Focus Tincture every day and love their chai tea blend. It's my go-to for a calming yet energizing boost. Elevate's products support mental clarity, immunity, and overall vitality. They ship nationwide, so whether you're new to functional mushrooms or already a fan, Elevate has something for you. Check them out at shopelevatemushrooms.com, where you will find a detailed description of each product and experience the difference for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the other stick, like, I would consider myself a crunchy mom. 100% I would consider myself an informed crunchy mom. And I have been attacked up and down, left and right by the natural community, because I am still a firm believer in science and what science is. And I do think that they are, I mean, I've been on these mom pages, these Facebook mom pages, and if you tell them that you're going to give your child a vaccine, they will sit there and tell you that your child should be taken from you. So it is just as extreme on both ends of the spectrum. And like, that's where there's just so much disconnect. It's like, if you give your child any vaccines in a lot of the crunchy mom space, they're going to tell you that that is an abuse to your child. If you don't give your child any vaccines, for people who are very pro-vaccine, they're going to tell you that's abuse for your child. When there's just this huge gray area in the middle where people should have informed consent and the right to choose what is best for their family. And it's like, if you make that choice, people are just going to not like it on either side.
While I agree with you, and I think that is great information to share, because I do think that it exists on both sides. Do you know that for a vaccine to be considered effective, it has to be administered into a certain percentage of the population? So like, what you're saying is great, that we should give everybody their choice and they should be allowed to choose. Now, is what would happen, for instance, right? So say if say 60% of us decided that we were going to choose to vaccinate our children with the MMR vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And then 40% of us decided that we were not going to do that. Guess what would happen in society? Measles would come back.
Mm-hmm.
Measles would come back. It would become a disease that is not eradicated from society, and it is around. Because even the people who are vaccinated, we actually don't really know. We only studied it for 42 days and, afterwards. So we don't actually know if how long the vaccine stays. It wanes. We know that it wanes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they say that it doesn't, but it does. We know for a fact it does, because there's plenty of vaccinated people who have gotten the measles.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would be, that is great. It's
Yeah.
great to say that but I'll tell you what, if that was the case, it would be the anti-vaxxers would have won, and they're not going to allow that to happen. The system will allow that to happen.
And, my background is not as a trained professional in vaccines, but I do think it is a very, very common misconception that when you get a vaccine, you're never going to get sick. And I think that that's something that we need to eradicate and squash, because just because you're vaccinated against something doesn't mean that you're not going to get sick with that something. The severity of sickness is going to be lessened. And that's the important part. When we talk about measles, people who are vaccinated against measles can still get measles. Yes, we had it eradicated or whatever in America, and now it's making a comeback, but it was still a thing in other countries, other developed countries. And if you got measles, the implications of that were so much less. There was less encephalitis. And I know people they love to say oh, well, that's just such a small chance. There are long-term consequences to some of these diseases that we use vaccines to help decrease the severity of them. So I kind of like to think of vaccines, and this is going to sound really silly, but it's kind of like a castle, right? And if you had a dragon outside and you didn't want it to get into the castle, but you didn't train any of the guards or tell them what the dragon or the intruder looked like, then it would walk right in. When we give a vaccine, those guards now know what to look for. They know what they're trying to keep out of the castle. And yeah, something might still try to get into the castle. It might get in, but it will quickly be kicked out, if that makes sense. I know it seems very childish to explain, but it's a way that I was explained going through college, and it really made sense to me, because it's okay, a vaccine is not going to get rid of these things. It's not going to make these things not happen, but it's going to make it so that way your own immune system can recognize the intruder, and instead of now trying to create a way to kick something out, it is already prepared with the armor for it, and it can attack it, and it can lessen severity, lessen the inoculation period. it's easier for your body to fight off if you do get sick with something like that. And protecting vulnerable populations in our country, like people with autoimmune disorders or people who can't get vaccines, because also if you have like a family history of like seizure disorders or like a susceptibility to autoimmune disorders, I don't think you should be getting vaccines. There's the whole genetics aspect of vaccines as well. But like, I think the majority of people would still choose to be vaccinated, and it would lessen the severity if they did get sick. And it would also help protect through herd immunity people who can't get those vaccines. I know that was a little bit of a tangent, but
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's just, I'm just gonna ask you some questions about it because I like the castle analogy is a good one. I might argue that those guards, they have been guards not just in this generation, but in their previous generation, and it's been a part of their, their lineage for almost millennia. And they don't even need to. They never actually need to see the dragon because it lives within their bones. They know how to fight it because it lives within their bones. So there is a difference between like innate immunity and learned immunity, and that's what But I'm curious what happened. So if you learn that, during COVID, I learned that in school as well, right? That it doesn't always, completely eradicate it, that you still have some chance. And then they told us during COVID that it was if you got the COVID vaccine, you were unable to transfer the virus to another human being.
Oh, that was like the biggest lie. It was
No, of course, yeah, right?
Like if you look up like American propaganda, like other countries study this in depth. It's in like their education system, American propaganda, and that's 100% what COVID was. It was the spread of misinformation and propaganda to scare people. And look at the beginning when they said that it came from a wet market, and we know that it came from an institute who is doing gain of function research. I have a video saved in my phone from when I first found out about COVID over in China, and I literally said this was a lab outbreak. I know this was a lab outbreak. It's a gain of function lab outbreak. We see it all the time because we use China as a vessel to really do gain of function research because they don't have much policy around it. They don't really care if you do it. They kind of encourage it. They incentivize it. And they were just like, nope, it's from a wet market, blah, 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 blah. And then here we are. Here we got
bit by a bat.
Yeah. They ate some tainted bat meat, and then everyone got COVID around the world. So for real, it was a really easy way for them to then be like, how much control do we have over the American people, over the global people? How much can we just tell them something and they're going to believe it and they're going to do what we tell them without thinking or questioning it? The whole basis of I can't, obviously this is not across the board because I know people who I really respect as scientists who just believed the propaganda, and it was really, really sad to see because as somebody who is in science and passionate about science and loves just how nothing is true, it's either supported or you can just break that thesis down and hypothesis and start all over. It was really sad to just see people take things at grain value and be like, yeah, that it will work. And it's like, but we know that's not how science works. We know we should be questioning things. We know we should be doing those things.
Yeah, well, they were locked out of their supermarkets and their gyms and their movement spaces. They weren't allowed to see their friends. They were forced to put a mask on. A lot of them were told that if they didn't do this, they were going to get fired from their jobs and unable to support provide for their family. So I have some sympathy for those folks, and I even have sympathy for the people who still believe it and still, because of the PSYOP was so great and so well done. It fucked up so many people that they just still believe it to the point where we're still vaccinating 9 million kids with a mRNA vaccine that we don't really know too much about, and it doesn't necessarily, it's not helping us, right? Like we're not, we are we the most vaccinated country in the world? I would guess yes.
I would assume so, probably, yeah.
And we have all the, our health expectancy is bad. Right now they're saying, and that's the thing is, I don't want to just people to think that because you keep talking about the science and we need the science. The science is never settled. So even if we had learned that MMR was successful and that this was a good thing and that we were using it and it was helping to eradicate measles, mumps, and rubella, and this is a good thing, that could change. That that vaccine could change, and it could, it should be studied if something comes up. And so this is huge right now, and you and I have discussed it a little bit offline, but like with the, the autism thing. And I don't necessarily think vaccines cause autism, but like we should look into what, and I don't know. I know people have told me that more kids are autistic, and now that, the diagnostic criteria has definitely gotten so much better. Also, these kids are put onto social media so young. So, like, of course, that's probably messing with their brain. Maybe that's what's making them, go in a certain way. But I do know, like, I've had personal conversations with women who are moms, and I know my wife, and I know moms and how they are intuitive to know this child, this bond. And like, I know what my 2-year-old could do at 2. And then I know moms who's shown me videos and pictures of their kids doing certain things. And they talk about how the regression can happen. But like, I've talked to moms that like literally it was right afterwards, it was right after the shot. And so like to just gaslight them and to say that that's not a possibility when we know that like side effects happen with all drugs. Yeah. Like, let's just actually like look into this. And if we need to make it a thing, and let's just figure out how to make it safer. What I would say, my policy, actually, and this is funny because, people, I don't know how you could ever push back against this, but anything that's going into a child's body perpetually, annually, and is required for them to go to school or to do anything should be studied perpetually, annually.
Yeah.
So that means every single year we're taking case studies and we're taking data and we're creating new studies to test this. We also have mass populations who don't do this, so we can study it very easily. The Mennonite community, the Amish community, they don't partake in this. So we have a baseline to study it against too.
Yeah,
it's simple clinical research. The work would almost be easy to do, but I even talked to some of my friends who are deep into clinical research, who do this for a living within 4 pharma companies, and they think that it's so convoluted as well.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, man, this is it's murky. It's not, people aren't getting healthier, and people want to argue with me about, hepatitis C and hepatitis B and COVID. It's like, I can't even have those discussions really. And I need to, because I think that I can be effective in helping people see a different way, but they just immediately think that I'm, an anti-vaxxer, that I'm this way, when it's like, no, I actually have 6 years. Virology, immunology. Yeah. You want to talk about it, baby? Absolutely. I can talk about it. We sat there, we took those classes, and so it's really stressful. And I think that for the first time ever, we're at least talking about it, and we're talking about I feel like if because I know I supported RFK from the I was in Boston when he announced his presidency. I think that we'd be actually in a better place if the Democrats had had gotten out of their own way, not subverted democracy, not subverted the primary by pretending that Biden was mentally capable and then putting up Kamala without a primary. Like, that's the biggest bullshit I've ever seen. And there was a movement behind Bobby Kennedy. It's actually why Donald Trump won the election, was because the independents from the health freedom movement got behind Bobby when he asked them to vote for Trump. That we would be better off of a country if Bobby Kennedy, in my personal opinion, we'd be better off right now as a country if Bobby Kennedy was the president of the United States over Donald Trump. I fully believe that. Yeah. He's getting a ton of hate right now and a ton of pushback, and of course that was going to be the case. And I know that programs are being cut and all this stuff is that we're talking about SNAP benefits and but I think that there's a lot of good that could come from this, that we just stuff that we've never questioned before. And, I know that you don't necessarily agree with me entirely. So
That's
I
okay.
I want to have some discourse here.
I think it's good to have these conversations, especially when it's with someone who you guys don't align. Like, we align on a lot of things, but I will be the first to say I'm not an RFK Jr. supporter. I think he is going to do a lot of harm for this country. And a lot of it just for me, it boils down to the way he's simplifying things. The way he talks about them, and he makes them seem like it's black or white when it isn't. There's so many things that make up these conversations, and he's also framing them in such a harmful narrative. When we talk about autism and even the 2-year-olds, once they get the vaccine, they start to regress. It's also important in that same context that there are children who are unvaccinated and still see autistic regression at 2 years old. 2 years old is the age of regression for children who have severe autism. And is it that maybe that child's genetic makeup isn't contuitive or supportive of the vaccine that they received, and that triggered something in their body for the ones that are vaccinated, that I think that that's absolutely a possibility. Is it that maybe their mother was exposed to certain environmental exposures while she was pregnant that led to a poor genetic makeup, where now these vaccines are triggering things in their genetics that's causing autism? I think that could be a possibility too. But I think that we can't just boil it down to, well, vaccines cause autism, when there is a lot of research out there that has shown or supported that that is not the case. There was one study by a quack of a scientist who said that vaccines cause autism. And if he hadn't published that, like, do I think people would have looked into autism? Like, probably not. So, like, in a sense, it's good that he published this quack of a study out there, that like it's now able to be studied more and people are having these conversations. But I also think it did a lot of harm, because people now are trying to boil these really complex issues down to like one solution, where like, you know, we can look back to World War II, where women were really forced into the work system, and a lot of them were working in dry cleaning and sewing places, and the environmental exposures that they were under. Like, dry cleaning is horrible for your endocrine system. It is horrible for your hormones. Now you're giving birth to somebody. Like, when a really interesting fact is, like, when you get pregnant and you're a woman and you're pregnant with a girl, like, all of the eggs for her lifetime, you're also growing. So now, like, whatever you're exposed to, you're also exposing your potential grandchildren to. And so, like, when women were forced into the workforce during World War II, and a lot of them were working in dry cleaning, they were exposed to so many toxins that, like, would be like my parents, and like what did that do to their genetics? And then they're passing that on to me. And maybe it's like some of those issues, or what we're eating, the crap we put into our body. There's so many different things that need to be looked into, but we also need to know that it's like something that may cause autism for one person isn't going to be the same as what causes autism for another person. And like, it's a case by case issue, and we can't put a blanket like solution or cause behind what autism is. And to maybe also think that like, hey, autism like isn't this horrible demonic thing that a lot of people think that it is. It is very, very sad when we see people who are nonverbal, like autistic, and they have like the mental capacity of like a 2-year-old when they're an adult. Like, I grew up, my very, very good childhood friend, I grew up right next to him. His name was Ashton, and he was still in high school with all of us when he was 22 years old, and he has the mental capacity of a 5-year-old. And like, it was so sad to see, but also like, he was still such a happy person. And yeah, he won't go on to like work a job, and his dad is his primary caretaker, but he's still a really happy person. And I see that joy that he brings to his family, and the joy he brought to me in my life, and the compassion for people he brought to me and the people who were around him. And I just think that it's a very heavy topic to discuss, but when we talk about what causes it, it's very complex, and also like, it's a spectrum. And like, there are a lot of people who are autistic that you may not know are autistic, because they fall on like the more functional side of a spectrum.
For sure. And what I'll say is maybe, because like, I hear that you're telling me that we should study it, right? Like, and so from my understanding, and I could be wrong here, but I've followed it pretty closely, and you know, Bobby Kennedy has mentioned vaccines one time on his interviews, where he has said the word vaccines. They kept trying to get him to say it, and he wouldn't say it. And he kept saying what you were talking about. Maybe we need to start looking into these environmental factors. We need to start looking into all of this. We need to, because guess what? Like, and that's my question, is like, somebody with autism, somebody with, you know, a caretaker of an autistic person, which my aunt is amazing and does, and my cousin is autistic, and, you know, this isn't somebody who, you know, and just so everyone understands, like, this is a kid who brings so much joy and happiness to people, and I want to touch on that as well. But also he's amazing at certain, you know, he probably got perfect scores in math on his SATs, and certain things he can do really, really well. And socially he can, I think he's gone out on a date and he's done, like, here and there, going to see friends and stuff. And like, he can interact with me and we can talk about stuff all the time. My uncle said to me the other day that, hey, Steve, that he's never going to be able to, he's going to be living with us forever. And that is a thing that has caused a lot of stress and hardship. My uncle would have it no other way. Right. But that is a thing that has happened. And so, we need to I think we owe it to those people, to everybody, to the parents and to the thing, not to take services away from them and not to decrease diagnosis criteria or to do any of that stuff. That is horseshit. But we owe it to them to study it. And I think that, like, that is what I hear from Robert Kennedy. And it's like, and for anybody who say like that anything's even happening right now, like the NIH isn't, they're going in there and they're cleaning things up right now. And, they just got Marty McCary and Jay Bhattacharya, confirmed. And so there's, and Dr. Oz, whatever, fuck that guy. But like, but they finally got to a place where maybe now at the end, by May, maybe they'll start to commission studies and maybe start to figure this out. So like, we should be studying this stuff. Hey, were these women, who were, put into this toxic load because they were, exposed to these type of workforce environment? Did this have an effect? And if it did, we need to really stop doing that immediately and figure out what this is, because it's not good for our population. It's not, it can be a really great thing to have somebody, to have people who think differently and to do that. That's amazing and awesome. And also, I heard somebody the other day that, like the people with disability and people with, that we need to take care of. And, they're here to help remind us that we're human, and that's they bring humanity back into everything. And I see that all the time, and that's a great thing. But we should still strive to help these people. If some of them, from like the few moms that I did get to talk to when I researched this and just talked to, and maybe they could be off, whatever, but they just felt like they have never been advocated for. Yeah. And that they, so that I think we need to figure out the toxic stuff. And I think RFK, I did say that, like, even I said in the beginning of the thing, if this is Trump administration, right? Like the Biden administration, they did their thing. And I said on a podcast that, and I don't even necessarily, I want 10,000 times more than this because that's what we need as Americans. But if the only thing that RFK and the Trump administration did was remove artificial dyes from our food, that's a fucking win. That is a huge win for us. Yeah, absolutely. And going in a direction of like just that alone. Yeah. So like, I don't know all the bad that's happening, but I know that for a while, democracy seemed like it was being subverted, and now everyone is telling me that it is being subverted, and it's like, well, I want to see what happens with the health stuff. I want to see what RFK, and I think that he would have been a better president than Trump. I just want to see what this guy can do and see if he can, can get these people. Because guess what? The guys who were there before, they were just lying. Where every single FDA director, do you know what they do afterwards?
Yeah, they go work for
Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson.
Absolutely. I think that there needs to be a lot more checks and balances when it comes to like where you can make your money, where you can work X amount of years after you like leave office or you leave a position. I think that there needs to be more regulations around that, heavily regulated regulations. So that way people can't just lie, be like, look at what I did. Well, look at what I can do for you. I think that is a huge issue, 100%. And most people that I talk to would also agree with that. And in that same sense, 100%, I'm a food lady. I advocate for whole food, locally sourced diets. Every single person should be eating that. People should be eating lean protein from a source that they know, that they can name, that they could go to and see. It's not sustainable in the way that the world, the money, if you follow the money.
That's what the 5% are doing.
Absolutely.
We're trying to struggle to do it. We're trying to make it. My food bill's about $150 more than it needs to be because of that. But I'm trying to feed my son the right food.
And people are trying everywhere. And, like cutting SNAP benefits, people think like, oh, well, we're just cutting the soda out of the SNAP benefits. Well, when you look at public health and you look at ways to make people comply with things, when you tell someone what to do, they're not going to do it. But when you give them the option, then they're more likely to do it. So if we increase the amount of money in SNAP and WIC benefits for fresh, locally sourced foods, and we still let them get their like little bit of soda that they want to get.
So what? Just I'm pretty hard lined on this one. I think because the profit center of the Coca-Cola companies who subsidize the American Diabetes Association, they subsidize they fund the American Heart Association to say certain things that we can add 10 grams of added sugar to infants. This is not okay. And guess what? If you are, it's not like if this is your money, giddy up. But this is something that you rely on from other people, from the state, from the state, from the the federal government, and allowing people to go buy poison, which don't get me wrong, that is what it is. Do we allow? Can people buy alcohol on food stamps?
I'm not sure on food stamps. Yeah, I'm more into the WIC side of things.
Well, of course, right. I'm just putting it to like an adult, right? And so like, we shouldn't subsidize these companies. We shouldn't be paying. These companies are what's wrong with America. The Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Doritos, Frito-Lay. These are what are wrong with America. And to take money out of their pocket and then to take that infrastructure and take that $10 billion we gave them and put those into the maternity wards in Maine, that's a giddy up.
Absolutely.
Okay? And so like if there's a situation where we could increase SNAP benefits for just local food, let's just do that. Let's force people to do it. We force people to do a lot of things. We force them to take fucking 10 vaccines 72 vaccines actually by the time that they're 5 years old. So why can't we force them to say, hey, you know what? We're going to force you to eat this healthy food. And if you need the assistance, this is how you can go get it.
Yeah. I'll just give you so in my public health degree, I had to do a lot of case studying, and a lot of it is how do you get people to comply with the things that are best for them? And that's basically what a lot of public health initiatives are. And over in Kenya, they had a really, really bad issue with HIV being spread, and it was being spread in the ports. And so what they did is they originally went in and they were like, hey, use condoms. And they were giving them to the women because typically the women were having sex with the sailors, and they were passing on HIV to the sailors who were then going to other ports, and those ports had high incidences of HIV. And so they were like, just use condoms, right? Makes sense. Well, when you tell someone to do something and they don't have any little incentive behind it, they're not going to do it. They've seen it across the board in all these initiatives that they try. They don't have a high success rate in it, and the rates are still increasing in these areas. And so what they did is they went in and they were like, hey, we know that you guys don't want to use condoms. What if we incentivize you to use our basically kind of not like a Planned Parenthood, but like a women's health center where we can check women for HIV. We can provide them with the medications that they need to not spread HIV, and we'll give you guys some money kickback if you come and use our services. And that's when they started to see a decrease in HIV incidences in these port areas. And it started out
they
in
increased
Kenya.
care. But there's a difference
but
between...
they incentivized the women because they were providing free condoms. Women weren't going to use them.
That's not incentivizing, though. Come on. Is that incentive? Yeah, it's incentivizing. Hey, if you really don't want
to
HIV because HIV sucks,
die.
Right?
But that's the thing. When we're looking at when we're looking at cutting, I 100% agree that big food is a huge driving cause of chronic illness in America. 100%. They poison us through our food. And in that same sense, if a family is more likely to seek out services for WIC, knowing that they could buy some soda if they wanted to, and that means that their children are fed, at least fed, those children are not starving, then I think that is important. And I think we should be increasing the amount of money allotted to families through food stamps and WIC by farmers markets. And they started to do that. But then what happened is the current administration turned around and cut the farming funding through WIC and through SNAP. And now those farmers can no longer provide that produce at the fresh farmers market, where we are trying to incentivize people to use their money on these cards with the local farmers. And now they can't. And it's hurting small farmers at such a large rate, small farmers who are already struggling so much.
Wait, so the SNAP benefits have already been cut and they can't use these services?
Yes.
I was at the Wentworth Market 2 weeks ago, and I was talking with Two Toed Farm, who I'm a good friend with, and I saw many people using their SNAP benefits and their WIC benefits.
So you can still use your SNAP and WIC benefits. What's happening is that the funding...
This was in New Hampshire.
Yes. So in Maine, if you look at what MOFCA's doing, and you can see it all over social media because they're standing up against the current administration, and what's happening is that this money has been promised to farmers. So basically, farmers have incentivizations to use certain things to upgrade their farms, to upgrade their services, to expand how much food they can produce.
Mm-hmm.
And they were already promised this funding. So the farmers, they went out knowing that they were promised this funding. They're like, hey, I have this funding coming. I'm going to be returned for this amount of money. So I'm going to take out this loan for this big tractor that I need that would improve how I could grow food. And now they're not receiving the funding they were promised. That funding has been frozen. So farmers are not receiving their grants that they were promised, that they used as a way to go out and get a loan and buy a new piece of equipment. And if you look at what like in Mofka and Maine, I advocate for them enough. They're really amazing in explaining what's going on. And every single day they have farmers on there talking about how they're being impacted. Like, yeah, right now you might be able to go into a market and use your benefits to buy local food. But what about when that farmer has to shut down because now he can't afford to continue to run his farm because he was promised funding that's frozen? And so he overstretched himself in a system that's already built to destroy small farmers. And now he has to close down. Who's going to be providing that food at those markets when they're all closed down?
I gotta educate myself on this because it's definitely something that needs to not be the case. I'm a part of a local meat, local meat subscription service, and they're great. And they were pretty clear to me that this none of this stuff that the current administration is doing is going to affect them, and that and I do think that that they should, if the funding is frozen right now, if the funding is right, I know that they're freezing like all government funding. So I'm sure these people are going to get their money. I don't think that exactly. And guess what? If the Trump administration does do this and they take money away from farmers, and opposite of what the Maha people want, the health freedom people want, real food from their community, then this is it. Then it's over for them.
Yeah.
So I think that the farmers will get their money, and they should get their money. And it's scary that that's having to go. We're all going through uncertainty right now, and that sucks. And we shouldn't have to go through uncertainty. But guess what? The only way is through. And sometimes you need to, juice some things up, man. And like where we were going, like where we were headed. We just wouldn't. If Kamala Harris was president right now, we wouldn't be talking about food. We wouldn't be talking about medicine. We wouldn't.
I mean, to Kamala Harris, and what she did expand Medicaid postpartum services throughout the country as her time as the vice president. That was like a main thing she ran on. I don't know if you knew that or not, but she made it so across the board in the entire country, Medicaid has to cover 12 months of postpartum services for women, which was not a requirement prior to. And that also forced private insurance companies to do the same. I did not like the Biden administration. A lot of people, because of just how vocal I am on social media, they think that I'm a through and through liberal. I'm not. I'm an independent. I'm very skeptical of the government. Anytime anyone comes into any position in the government, they say they're going to help you. I think we should be and what are you going to get out of it? Because I really don't think that people who are in the government are doing it for the right reasons. There's always an economic incentive, even when it comes to RFK Jr. He has an entire company, right, where he makes money for making people, you can say, providing a service, but he's in with big supplement. He's in with them. And so he still has something to gain from it. Every person who's in the government has something to gain from the work that they're doing, the bills they're trying to pass.
Yeah, everyone has something to gain from it, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think that when anybody comes in on either side, and they say, I'm going to help you, I'm going to make change, I'm going to help, we should just be like, and what do you have to gain from that? What if you do help us, right? What's on the other end for you?
You want to know what that exactly? And that's why I like RFK, because I know what's on the other end for him. I know it's on the other end. I know what it is. It's proving to himself that he's worth something, that he's worth something to his family, that he's worth something as a lawyer, that he has passion in his job. RFK is not. I don't think he's trying to get rich. I don't think he's trying to enrich himself. Regardless of where he lies in that, the amount of money he's gotten from being a Kennedy, that's definitely not his game. So that's what I look at. I look at this guy and I'm like, as a person who didn't need to do any of this and could have just went off and had a great time in San Diego and in LA, with Cheryl Hines, his wife, and just and ripped it up.
Look at his family. Look at look at the nepotism in the Kennedy family, and also how they turned around and they lobotomized Rosemary Kennedy
His
because she
sister,
had
his
a
dad made that
developmental-
decision.
Yeah,
Sure, that's horrible.
And then they locked her away for her life.
It
And
was horrible. Yeah, it was horrible. He didn't make that decision. You know, my dad made plenty of decisions that in my family that I didn't agree with, that I would tell him right now to his face that I didn't agree with, but I didn't get them, you know, I didn't make those decisions.
yeah, I think we have to apply the corruption to these large nepotism families as well. And like
His family hates him. They called him out. They went to the Biden administration. You know, they went to yeah, Easter. You know, they
but
went
how
to,
much does right if when we look at like propaganda and like American propaganda.
Oh, it is probably,
If,
yeah,
yeah,
his
if
family
somebody,
still
if
loves him.
his
They
fa-
probably, they
yeah,
probably spent Easter
yeah,
together,
exactly.
you know, to some
So
extent.
like if
you
they're
know?
out there telling, well, we don't support him, and then what does that do? It creates this diverse. Well, for some people, it's like, well, his family doesn't even support him. He's an outcast for them, and then for others, it's like, well, his family doesn't even support him, so why should we? And it just creates this weird little trickle to like change people's minds and to make them think that like one way or another, it's supporting their stance. And I think that a lot of it is just propaganda. I think that RFK Jr. maybe could have done really, really well in being like the director of the EPA or something like that. He's an environmental lawyer. Like he cares a lot about the environment. And I can see that through and through. But there are a lot of things that he has to do in his current role that I do not think he is the best for. And I think that for me, that's what it kind of boils down to. Like, I think removing food dyes is amazing. I think heavier regulations on large companies to not just be able to do whatever the hell they want to do without any oversight would have been an amazing issue for him to tackle, whether it's like for big food companies or where they're dumping the water. Like Flint, Michigan still doesn't have clean water, and all the people that are probably going to die and get cancer or pass poor genetics onto their children due to that issue. He would have been great for that. I just think that his role has so many things that he has to do that he is not the best fit for. And for me, that's where it kind of comes down to. Like, I would have loved to seen him in a position that isn't the current positions he's in, just because I think that it does require a lot of him that maybe he isn't able to do. And I also think that, you know, him being in the position that he has when it comes to like the recovery community, I think that it creates a really good place for a conversation, because a lot of people will not hire ex-addicts for a lot of things. And he openly has admitted that he was a heroin addict.
Yep.
And the alteration to it. Yeah, the alteration
now he's
to
a
like
secretary of HHS.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, and the alterations to his brain that also made like, okay, so then we need to also, as a society, change our narrative around people who are in recovery. If we're going to do it for him, we need to do it for others. And that's also just not happening. People will be like, well, they're a drug addict. Like, they're out on the street shooting up. It's like, he was also a drug addict. He might not have been out on the street shooting up, but he was still a drug addict. So why can't we meet people with a compassion? There's potential. Maybe they could be the next attorney general. And we're not meeting people with that compassion, but we're extending that compassion to someone who's in the place that he's in.
It's got to start somewhere.
Yeah, so I think I do think he could. We're
talking about that for the first time. You know what that's like. So for somebody with HHS, you know, the HHS controller of 9 agencies is out there openly talking about how he did heroin as he was a kid, and there's people out there who will defame him for that and talk about how he was not, you know, he should not be in this position because of that, and he's right there.
Yeah,
like, that's a giddy up, and that takes time. Guess what? Next time that I have to, you know, apply, when I'm applying for that grant and they say to me, hey, Steve, you used to be a drug addict, you know, and I don't know if you knew that about me. You know, I have my struggles, you know, I've been there. And so, you know, same as RFK. And here I am today giddying up. And I know that that's the case. I had to deal with a lot of that in my career, you know, when I was getting back into pharmacy and doing my thing, I had to deal with a lot of pushback. You know, this kid's a lot of people would still look at me like that. Guess what? That's changing because he's in that position. It's been 3 months.
Yeah.
It's been 3 months, you know, and
I just think he is doing a lot of harm. I do. And like I said, I would have loved to see him in a position that I think he would have been best for. I just don't think that it's this position.
Fighting big corporates. That's what he does. Fight big food. Fight big pharma.
But they're rolling back. But then when you look at like what's actually happening, they are rolling back regulations on big companies. They're rolling back environmental regulations on big companies.
I think that's We have to see
they're
what actually
cutting NIH
happens.
funding. They're firing scientists. They're saying you cannot study things that like have the word. And I know people are out here saying that this is like not a real thing. A lot of my friends going to St. Michael's College, it's a heavily science school. Most of my friends went on to like become lawyers and doctors and research scientists. A lot of them work at huge research places. They have memos that they have been given that say they can no longer study things that have these topics in them, and that includes
what?
the word women, reproductive like health. Those are words that they can like if
Okay, so
that's
if
what
this
your research
actually
says.
happens, if
No,
this
it is
actually-
happening. And that's what's the
I know
that's the
it's saying
sad
that,
part.
right, I know, and that's it's been 3 months, right? It's been so. I'm going to have you back on in December, and
Yeah.
please, I want to
Yes,
have you back on for December because I want to see where we're at then.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see what has actually happened. Are these, after we go through the summer markets, are people actually getting affected through their food? Is the government not providing for them like they should be? Where are we actually at? I have to give these people some time. And I do think that it's horrible if that is, if they're taking away research from women's reproductive rights. That's horrible. Obviously, we need to go in the other direction of that, right? Like we didn't even get to talk about IVF today and all, and that, that whole thing. And, I which worries me, that worries me. It's good that we have it, but is that the way that we're going,
yeah.
And so do we need to study it more? We need to study it more. We need to look into it more. So so provide these people with the funds to do this. But at first we need to, there's a lot of, grants being out there and, about studying, with the transgender stuff, there's a lot of stuff out there. So that's likely why we're seeing some of this reproductive rights stuff, because are we studying that men can have babies? Because guess what? We shouldn't be fucking studying that. That's a waste of fucking money and time, big time. Sorry, we shouldn't be, studying that. We shouldn't be studying whether, cocaine affects the, affects the the gender of mice. We
Okay,
be,
but that was also that was not what the research was on, and that was really unfortunate that was the wording that was used. It was transgenic mice, which are mice that you can alter their genes in. I did this research when I went to college, and it's basically there's a strain of mice, and you can alter their genes, and mice reproduce so fast that you can see the immediate effects by altering their genes. And the research itself was not transgender mice. It was the effect of cocaine on transgenic mice, which means that they have, you can turn genes on and off. It wasn't that they were transgender mice. They were
why don't we use regular mice for that? Why do we use these transgenital mice for that?
For transgenic mice, you use transgenic mice because they were created to turn genes on and off. Like they're a strain of mice that was created in a lab. Do some research on some transgenic mice because they're not transgender mice. It has nothing to do with their sex hormones. It has nothing to do with their reproductive parts. It is their genes. Transgenic is their genetic makeup and the ability to hold multiple variations of a gene on one genome and to turn that on and off. And it was really unfortunate, with the propaganda issue, was he given the wrong term on purpose or accident, or did he just say the wrong thing? Because it was not transgender mice, it was transgenic mice, and they are used in so many research facilities.
And the research wasn't being done to have anything to do with anything to do with transgender at all?
No, it's transgenic.
No, I understand what you're saying, but you can still use a transgenic mice for some type of study that's within...
it had nothing to do with transgender. He used the wrong term.
Yep.
And it was really unfortunate. And when we talk about it's for me personally and my personal beliefs, I think that it was just another way to kind of demonize a population of people that have existed for a really, really, really long time.
Yeah.
To just think that it hasn't is I think that that's also a society issue to think that transgender people haven't. Yes, there are extremes now. It's changed a lot, but this has happened for most of society. It used to happen back in Egypt. You can look at the history of Egypt when a family would only have girls or they would only have boys. In Egypt, you had to send your son off to war. And if you only had daughters, one of your daughters would be dressed up as a man. They wouldn't go and check to see if she was a man. And your daughter would assume the roles as a man and go and fight with men in war, for Egypt. And the same thing, your daughter was to be given off to marriage. If you only had boys and you were from a poor family, they would cross-dress their sons and send them to rich families to be married off. And it's something.
Why would a rich family marry why would they do that? Why would a rich family take a poor transgender child
because
instead of just getting someone else?
It wasn't seen as transgender.
It was
Like,
what was it seen as, like a prince, a rich family is gonna, gonna give their son off to somebody, and all these beautiful women show up that this son can produce offspring with, which is the biggest thing in any ancient society, is to continue your lineage, and instead they choose a boy.
well,
Come on.
most rich families did not, the wife did not have the children, and that's also just like a big misconception
whatever,
for like
people-
yeah, it was like you would have, I know like people are gonna think this is like not the case, but when you like, I love history, and when you study history, you see it, like it's the same thing with wet maids and handmaids. The woman was not the one that would have, like, if a king was married to a queen, the queen would not be typically the one that would have a child. They did not do that for a multitude of reasons. The queen could die in childbirth. And once they started to see that increase in these royal families, they started to have handmaids where they would get them pregnant. They would have the child. Same thing with wet maids. Like if a woman did give birth, if a queen did give birth, they didn't want her to breastfeed. So they found a mom who had a child, and that mother would breastfeed the child. That's what a wet maid is.
Yeah, that's what a wet maid is.
Yeah.
This is also the same population that would interbreed and have cousins and brothers and
absolutely,
just sleep together so that they kept their genetic line.
No, absolutely.
They weren't just letting anybody into the juice.
100%. But just to think that like cross-dressing or transgender people are just happening now,
you want to
is like
express
a
yourself. Yeah, it's a misconception. 100%.
Yeah,
and I've looked up the
absolutely.
Native American stuff. You want to express yourself the way that you want to express yourself, giddy up. When
Yeah.
you are a full-fledged adult, and what
that-
we've decided
100%.
in this country, what an adult is, which is 18 years old, if you want to go and do that, then go ahead. My problem is and I know this is narrative-based, and I know, we talked about this a little bit before the show, but that these women play, girls playing, boys playing girls sports, and before you told me that it wasn't, it's not really an issue because it's such a small percentage of the population, and so we should never create rules for what we talked about earlier with Hep B, right? We
Yeah.
should never create rules for a small percentage of the population because it's going to subvert society. And what happened with what I would predict would happen with this, right? Like right now, it might be maybe there's 5 or 10 or whatever, boys that are playing girl sports. I know, a girl lost out in a skiing competition and in a track competition. That was fact. And you mentioned like equal pay, like it once, if you want to know how equal pay will happen in like the WNBA, for instance, is if all the boys become girls and start, because it's incentivized, because society has now incentivized this. So now about all these parents, right? It's really hard to get into elite universities. If my boy, who's pretty athletic, he's like a Division II college basketball player, maybe a Division III college basketball player. If he was a girl, then he would be a WNBA player. He'd be able to get into Duke. He'd be able to go to Syracuse, to UNC. That is huge incentive, Desiree.
I know,
That's
but
huge
to think
incentive.
a lot of
transgender.
a lot of transgender children don't play sports, and I'll tell you why they don't play sports, because there's a lot of, first of all, like when obviously when you pump hormones into somebody, it changes their chemistry in their brain, and there is a lot of subconscious disapproval of yourself that comes when you're trying to fit into a box that society says you have to fit into, and you do not feel like you fit into that box. And I do not see a place where, and I could be wrong, and it would be very unfortunate if I was, but I do not see a place where parents are force their children to be transgender to get ahead in a sporting event. Most transgender children do not participate in sports.
Right now, I agree with you.
And I believe that will continue because there is
Indefinitely, forever, if it becomes a normalized thing in society that trans people are able to just exist as very young age and are able to transition at young. A lot of these people don't even have to go on hormones, right? Like they don't have to. You just have to identify this way.
No, absolutely. We had this
We're not
conversation
testing for
before. Like
hormones.
I do fully. Well, hormones are a really hard thing because like women with PCOS, which you can get from the time you start puberty, creates a higher level of testosterone than like a woman who doesn't have PCOS. So like if we're basing it off of hormones, then yeah, they would test probably higher, closer to a man. That's why a lot of women with PCOS grow mustaches. They have smaller breasts. There's a lot of things that your hormones play a role into.
Put 50 men in a room and test their testosterone and estrogen levels, and they're going to all be different, varying degrees.
Absolutely.
It doesn't make them more of a man
no,
or less of a
100%.
man.
And that's why I think that it enters into a really, really slippery slope where this is just a really small population of people. And when we talk about like children, that's just like where it really bothers me, because it's like these are children we're talking about. And I will go on record to say, like, I do believe that when it comes to like gender affirming surgery and even hormone replacement surgery or hormone replacement therapy, that those are things that should start when somebody turns 18 years old, when they're an adult and they can make a decision for themselves. I am a firm believer in that. I believe that there's a lot of mental health help that we can help children with along the way. And I also think that in the same context, like, it's not that we should try to fix transgender people. I don't think that there's like a fixing to do for them. I think that there's support we can provide them and figure out like, hey, is this like just some gender dysmorphia maybe, or is this you are transgender and this is something you would like to explore when you're an adult, and these decisions can be made as an adult and not a child. I think it is harmful when we start to explore these different like hormone replacement therapies or gender affirming surgeries on children. There's a lot of harm that goes into that, because there's like a second puberty that a lot of people experience in adulthood that they haven't got to experience, and that could change like how they're feeling. It changes their brain chemistry. There's just a lot of things, but I think when it's the current issue that we're seeing like in Maine, I think that there's a lot of exploitation of children, and we need to continue to remember that these are children. Like, they are children. We're not talking, like, the context in Maine right now is we're not talking about men in women's sports. We're talking about boys in girls' sports, and they're children who deserve to be supported and not demonized.
Yeah, I agree. We shouldn't demonize children. We should provide them with, if they are this tiny, from my understanding of it, and I do want to call it tiny, it was like 0.018% of the population, up until maybe 1.4% of the population is who could actually be considered trans. That's just, we can't make rules, and can't, people were putting their, their pronouns in every single thing, and were forced to do that. And if they weren't do that, that wasn't okay. There's these open shows that I'm seeing. Like I said, a lot of this is propaganda, but there's like people who are doing all the furry contests and doing all this stuff that's, it's become sexual. This is sexualizing kids. That's, there's obviously people behind this that are, right? That's, you want to talk about pedophiles and that. It's like, there's a lot of this behind the movement. And I have a ton of gay friends. I love to go out and dance with my gay friends. I love to go, I'll go to Main Street in a Gunkway, Giddy Up, send it. I love the gay community. They are such a, a part of me. I've had, gay men, I've had lesbians on the show, and I have a lesbian friend, who two of them, that I speak to intimately about this. We trust each other, and they're like, yeah, if I was in school and I was convinced they're more tomboyish, they like to be outside. Yeah. And they were like, you could have convinced me I was a boy, and I would have done everything possible to become a boy. And that is so scary, because it's not just like your parents who are convincing it too. It's like, that like 90% of teachers, something crazy, are identify as liberal compared to a conservative. That means that they probably agree with this messaging that it's okay to tell kids I could convince my son he's a mango. Yeah. Hey, dude, you're a mango. And he's going to grow up his whole life thinking that he's a mango just because I told him that. And then maybe a teacher said, affirm that for him. So it's a scary thing, and there needs to be guardrails around it. Yeah. And if we can't make rules for a tiny percent of the population, we need to, is what I've come up with is like, sure, maybe there should be one person per county that is educated in this, that can take care of this, that is educated in psychotherapy, is educated in all of it, and one person per county that if a kid goes through the regular system and they through the regular school system, regular therapy, and they end up and we have this person that's accessible to us. Yeah. But there's like 1,000 different clubs, 1,000 different nonprofits that are creating every single business that you go into. Like, you're just being subjected to this stuff, and I don't know if I like I said, I love the gay culture, I love the drag culture. I'll celebrate that, but I don't think you should be doing it at a brunch.
Absolutely. I think that there is a time and place, and it's the same thing like when it comes to like sexual education of children in the public school system. That there is a time and place for like how deep into conversations that you should get. But I do think that it is important for children to have representation. The gay rights movement was like Stonewall, things like that. That was like headed by like who we would consider today, people would consider, because like a lot of people don't understand like transgender, but like it was like drag queens who were at the forefront of Stonewall. And so to just like act like this is like not a thing that is happening is harmful to the entire LGBTQ community. But I do think that like when it comes to children, like there are certain things that we should discuss with children and there are certain things we shouldn't discuss with children. But I don't think that when it comes to transgender people, like we shouldn't be pushing any ideology onto children. But that goes across the board for like a lot of things, like that we shouldn't be pushing our ideology onto children, that if you believe in like a family system, school should be a place for children to feel safe if they don't feel safe at home, but also we should be giving parents the liberty to choose what their children are exposed to. But we do need representation of transgender people in our community, in our society, just like we need representation of gay couples in our community, in our society. I have a lot of friends who are like gay and bisexual and lesbians, and they tell me right now the amount of straight people I've seen make out in my life didn't make me straight. And it's the same context for the amount of gay people you see make out in your life is not going to make you gay. And the same thing for the amount of transgender people you see in your life isn't going to make you transgender, because for those transgender people, they're surrounded by people who are not transgender, and that doesn't make them not transgender. So these are like these are just some concepts that
that's a crazy concept. Obviously, you're not gonna you don't get the gay by fucking by being around people, of course. But when it's in society, and this is a real thing, right? Like, so we're starting to happen more now. But look at lesbian people and gay people; they don't have children at the same rate as straight couples. Mm-hmm. When you don't have children, if I didn't have children, do you know what I would be doing? Mm-hmm. And if I didn't have a wife or a child, or even if it was me and my wife, I'd be probably, I'd be doing off. I'd be poly. I'd be, traveling all over the place, just living my life. It leads, the family system creates a system, not always, but sometimes creates a system where there's more, there's more stuff that's grounded. And maybe some of that stuff is okay, and I've had a lot of discussion on this, but the access to pornography, the access to it's
pornography has single-handedly destroyed like America in and of itself. I don't know if but down in Florida they just passed legislation where now you have to put in your ID information to like get onto Pornhub, and it's passed in Florida, so that way they can track and see what you're watching.
It's horrible. They shouldn't do that, but they should.
They shouldn't. But pornography, accessibility of pornography has really destroyed America.
Yeah, stop blaming the people. Go after the big companies. Go after the Pornhub who created it instead of the human beings who just have access to it and they're on their phone. And then you're gonna fuck up their life because of it.
Yeah.
Desiree, you go.
Yeah, no, yeah. I have a whole tangent. I'm not going to go on it right now. I'd love to discuss it. We can discuss it another time. I think pornography is really harmful to Americans, to the family unit, to supporting families in America, but also like women are having children a lot later, and that has a lot to do with policy in America and the lack of access to maternity leave, telling women, like when we get to IVF, like telling women, oh, you can just wait, you can freeze your eggs, you can do it when you're later. Like yes, gay and lesbian couples may not be having children at the same rate as straight couples, but also there are a lot of children neglected in a broken system that we currently have. And in the same context, women who want to be successful in their career are told to wait to have children. And these are all societal issues that we need to address, and we need to change the narrative around in order to support families in America. You cannot have the world continue to go round without children being born, and children deserve a safe, warm, loving, providing for environment to grow up in. So, yeah.
I think it comes back down to putting more money in middle-class families.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree that middle class is overseen a lot.
It's almost as simple as that. I think if you put money into the middle-class families, the middle class will build the nation.
Absolutely.
Like we always have.
Yeah, but when we do tax cuts for big corporations, that doesn't help anyone.
No, absolutely
because
not.
Who has to make up that difference in the tax? The middle income does.
Yeah, right. So, and they've been stealing from us for a while.
Absolutely.
Desiree, where can the folks find you online if and they want to follow you and continue some of these great conversations that we've been having today?
You can follow me on Instagram at desi.berry, and I make all the posts for the Postpartum Project and their postpartumproject.me, and that's our website also.
Guys, please check out the Postpartum Project. Please follow Desi. As you know, Desiree, please, subscribe to the show because it helps us out so much. Share this one with a mom that needs to hear it. Maybe they'll give me some pushback. I'm ready for it. We're going to keep the discourse going. We're going to have Desi back for sure. I've had a really awesome time chatting with you today. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really great. And I love having these conversations. So it's awesome when I can get in a room with someone who can keep up.
Could I keep up?
Absolutely.
Well, giddy up. We're gonna do it again, Desi. Guys, thank you so much. We will see you next time. Giddy up.